All right, and so welcome back. We are in the second half of our first session of the communication sessions. Thank you for joining us. Hope you got a chance to check out 16personalities.com. This is just one of many ways of categorizing personality. And like I said before, take it with a grain of salt. We've been sitting around the room here just talking about some of our results. The point of any relationship is to devote yourself to learning the full language of the other person. Did you guys catch that, what I said that right there? That's the purpose of the relationship right there, is to devote yourself to learning the full language of that other person. To understand how that person sees the world, because they're very different than you are. They're complex, and they're very different than you are. And once you, put someone in a box, so to speak, or categorize someone with these personality tests or different gifting testings like we've done at different events in our church and leadership settings and work settings, you might have taken different getting to know you things, it's only categorizing it just by a little bit. It's only kind of saying the right ballpark of where a person is. Within that is a whole bunch of complex differences and innuendos on the whole deal. And so the whole purpose of a relationship is learning the full language of the other person. And if you let that settle for a while into your thinking, it sheds a lot of light onto our relationships, whether it's a real close, long-term boss-employee relationship, or with a coworker, with a friend, with a family family member, friends, couples for sure. I mean, this is huge, that you can recommit, you can redevote your life to saying, you know what, I want to be able to see the world like you see it. I want to learn the language that you're speaking fully. I want to understand the page that you're on in life and when it comes to the many varied topics that we discuss. And we want to do that so that we can understand how the other person sees the world. I mean, how many of us could talk for like a few minutes on how our spouse sees the world? Well, she sees the world as, the lens that she uses when she looks at the world is, right? Is it, how can I get things done? Is it, how can I help somebody? Is it, what are the deeper meanings? Is it, can we put ourselves in the other person's shoes and begin to see how they see the world? Whether that's a spouse or a family member or whoever that might be. There's a lot of benefit in doing that. And I asked that question to say, you know what, I think after a couple of sentences, we would be a little bit dumbfounded for words. We wouldn't really know what to say. Well, she's the kind of person who, or he's the kind of person who sees the world as, and then we would run out of things to say. Why? Because we can become better and better students of the other person in our key relationships, all right? You might want to write this down. Just if you've got some room in the margin on top of the page or whatever, write this: become a student, not a critic. Just write that somewhere. It's not one of your blanks, but become a student, not a critic. Listen, in a long-term relationship, whether it's a friend or a boss or whatever it might be, you're going to become more and more over time one of those. You're going to become more and more fascinated with who that person is and become a student of that person and how they see the world, or you're going to become more and more critical of how they do things and how they think and why, because they're different from you, right? And that familiarity can breed that contempt. That's where we drift to, but we need to lead ourselves to better places than that, especially in relationships that matter to us. Write this down. Language is the sum total of how a person thinks and communicates. I'm taking the analogy of like a literal language, and saying this, that the language of that person that you understand is how a person thinks and communicates. In England, where I'm from, there's all kinds of dialects, right? It's all the same English language, but there's all kinds of dialects. I mean, you can drive just for like just a short distance or whatever and be, like, I can't even understand these people. They're speaking the same language, but it's so different, right? Like, it's like, so what you're doing is you're trying to understand that the particular dialect of that person that you're building that relationship with. We tell couples this all the time, and you can take this to the bank in your romantic relationships, marriages, or key relationships that you might be thinking about as we go through communication. But find a way to talk about your talking. You might want to jot that down somewhere too. It's just a very valuable phrase. To be able to say this: honey, we just need to take an evening, take a night or whatever, and talk about our talking. There's the phrase right there. We need to talk about our talking. Well, what do you mean talk about your talking? You need to have conversations that go like this. The other night, when we kind of got in a tiff about yada, 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 Yeah, what about it? Why are you bringing it up again? I thought we were just going to leave it. Well, I don't want to tackle the issue anymore, but I wanted to talk about how we talked about that. And then you begin to bring some insight. Okay, here's how I see things, and I think that I'm guessing that you're seeing things from a completely different page, a completely different point of view. And I think that's why we're clashing, that even though we want the same thing in our family or about what this issue is, we want the same thing. We're both working hard towards the same thing. We're clashing because our viewpoints are different. And, when you talk to me in that tone of voice, or when you bring that up again, it makes me feel like, right? And you can talk about your talking. Without that kind of conversation, you can even do that in a boss-employee relationship, in some sort of like review or kind of sit down, let's talk about how things are going. Let's talk about our talking. When you treat me like, or when you criticize me in front of, here's what it does for me, right? And you can begin to talk about how that goes down. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to learn the full language of that other person. Check this out. I said we're complex. Check this out. Communication between two people is just vastly more complex than the two people that are trying to have the conversation. What you speak is more than the words you say. You might have heard this breakdown go different ways, but it's basically this. This is how your message gets across. 38%, write that number down there. 38% of what you're saying, of how you're coming across is your tone of voice. 38%. That's high, isn't it? The tone of voice you use. Hey, how's your day? Hey, how's your day? Your tone of voice, Hey, can you come over here for a second? Can you come over here for a second? Like they say different things, right? I mean, there's different nuance in there. The next one, 55% is body language. Everybody kind of shift a little bit here. Tell me something different. 55% is body language. Isn't that high? Didn't you find that high? I mean, when I read that, I mean, if I'm going to improve my communication, I'm thinking immediately about the words that I'm saying. But wait a second, 38%, 55% hasn't even touched the words that I say. Okay, watch this. Here's your words and content. Somebody's doing the math, lightning fast. 7%. Wow. Think about that. 7% is actually the words and the content. This is why you can have, the same conversation, same kind of words, same kind of content or whatever, and it goes very different ways. And it goes very different ways because of these other things. And you can talk about your talking in this way, and you can say, you know what, the body language, I just find that so threatening. Maybe that's something a boss used to do, or somebody else in authority or whatever, or a teacher or something. You're like, when you use that tone of voice, or when you use it like that, or stand like that, or whatever, here's what it's making me feel. And chances are the other person's going to be, really? That's not what I'm feeling when I'm doing that, right? They're saying, I'm just reminding you about something that you wanted me to remind you about, and you're sitting there feeling like got at and picked on or nagged or, whatever the case may be, right? And so to talk about your talking in this way, you can bring out these different aspects and say that the tone of voice, body language, words, content, you can pick any one of those. But while we're sitting around here tonight, I'm kind of amazed again at talking about these different personalities tests. Fill in this next blank. Isn't it true that we love to be known? We just love it. I just, for someone to understand me, it just feels so great. We love it when someone else understands us. Isn't that right? When we're kind of like, I just feel so understood. I feel validated that someone understands me. And we love it even when we understand ourselves. Just to read something online that's been generated from a few questions that we've asked. We love to do that because we like to be able to put words around who we are and how we come across. And so this activation, this test that we took is just a great example of that. However, and I'm going to throw the flip side out here just briefly. However, many of us, perhaps most of us, when it comes down to it, don't like to be put into a box. It's your next blank. We don't like to be categorized or kind of, oh, you belong in that category or that box. It makes us want to jump out of it. Why? Because deep down inside, we know something. And we would say, because we believe in God, that this is something that is a reality from God, is that we are unique. Right? We might be in that category, but we don't like to be feel like we're being put in a box because we are unique and we long to be discovered on a continual basis. We long to be discovered. Listen, I could go home and I could bring out the results of this test with Mara, I could get Mara to take that test too, right? And we could sit there and talk about different things about that, and we could like have a great little conversation about some of the things maybe we missed when we went through it before, right? And we would just share that we know each other kind of feeling, right? We would share that feeling of connection that comes from really understanding and learning about each other. It would be a really neat experience. It'd be lots of fun. But then when tomorrow comes, I could do that tonight. But then when tomorrow comes, there's going to be that thirst that's still there in her and still there in me that still wants to be known, that still wants to be discovered. We want that on a continual basis. And so it becomes important, and you can jot this down in your notes in your margin, it becomes important to update, to get an updated snapshot of each other, especially in a long-term relationship. You know, if you're working with someone year over year, or friends with someone year over year, marriage, obviously, to get an updated snapshot of someone. So you used to feel like this about this. How do you feel now? Go ahead and get that updated snapshot. Otherwise, we're thumbing through old photographs, assuming that someone has stayed the same, and they haven't. Oh, this can be really, really valuable. You can be in a conversation with your spouse. You know, you assume that they've kind of evolved with you through a certain situation or through a certain set of beliefs or whatever. And you can say, you know what, honey? I just think we need to update our snapshot of each other when it comes to this. Right? In other words, that old photograph that you have that tells you about how I think about that, I want you to set that aside for a moment, and I want you to let me paint a different picture in your mind, right? I think we need a different snapshot when it comes to this, right? Can you give me that updated snapshot? Can I give you, right? Great terminology to use, something that Mara and I have done for a long time, because the truth of it is that we are continually on the way to becoming who we are. We're evolving as people. Can you see that? We're not a static, take a personality test, this is me for the rest of my life, right? We're not like that. We might have some of those same kind of trends or threads throughout our whole lives, but we are on our way to becoming more and more of who we're meant to be, you know, as we grow older and older. And so we've got to give ourselves the ability to be able to change and to be able to understand people differently that are close to us. We reward our partners by knowing them and understanding them in a more intimate and individualistic way. Okay? You want to bless your spouse, you want to serve your spouse, you want to bless your boss, serve them, a friend, family member. Here's how it's done. Learn to understand them. Seek to understand them in a more intimate and individualistic way. It's this understanding that is the glue between couples, between friends. That understanding that goes deeper than the stuff on the surface of our lives. And your relationships start from this assumption. Okay, you ready? In your relationships, whether you've been married 5 years or 20 years, start from this assumption right here. I don't really understand you. You do that? And as you're saying it, as you're starting with that assumption, you might, in the back of your mind, be thinking, you know what, I've lived with this person. I know exactly what they're thinking. I could finish their sentences and make their sandwiches. I know all this, right? But if you start from the fresh assumption, your eyes will be open to brand new ideas, and you will give them that freedom to be able to be that for you and do that with you. This goes especially for the relationships that you think you get the most, right? That you think that you understand them the most. Start with this assumption: I don't really understand you. The personality tests, you know, that we can take, and the ones that we looked at just a few moments ago, these are just windows, right, into the soul of another person. Isn't that right? They're windows into the soul of another person, and there's many more rooms in that person waiting to be discovered. This knowledge simply paves the way for true communication to take place. For true communication to take place. So the more you listen to each other, the more you'll understand each other, obviously. Write this question down in the margin somewhere. Find ways where it's appropriate to say this to the people that comprise the key relationships in your life. Hang on a second. Here's the phrase. Help me understand how you see that. Okay? Instead of thinking in your mind, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. That is so completely different from the way that I saw that, the way that I felt that happened, the way that went down. You know, or instead of, you know what? Women. Psh, you know, or, you know, men. Who can understand a man? Well, that's pretty simple. But try the other one. Women. You know, like women. Who can understand? You know, instead of like throwing your arms up about it and just being like, I don't get it. I don't know. As soon as you do that, you abscond yourself from the responsibility of, wait a second,
help me understand. That is so radically different from my conclusion. That is so radically different from my memory. Can you help me understand? There's your phrase. Can you help me understand how you see this? You know, so we moved to this new place, or we started this new job, or we had this new kid, or, you know, all these different things started happening in our lives or whatever, and then you started, you know, exhibiting this kind of behavior, or, you know, something was going on in your life right there. Can you help me understand? Everybody wants, if they believe that question is genuine, everybody wants to answer that question, right? Everybody wants just the little bit of oxygen that's given to them when you ask the question, can you help me understand how you saw that? Can you help me understand the way that that is for you? Everybody wants that. And so to provide that for the significant others in our lives, the key relationships in our lives, is really just to provide it with the oxygen that it needs. And it's a great way forward into some great conversations. Remember, the point is not to make your point about the topic. It's just to get on that same page. All right, I think that basically wraps up our second part, the second half of our session here tonight. And so thank you for joining us again. If you've got any questions, please email me, Rowan at GatewayVictory.com. Send me those 16personality.com answers and responses. And I'd love to kind of chat over that with you as well and get to know you better just as a church family. If you're joining us or been watching this through Periscope or through our cached version, thank you for doing that. And any suggestions you can send our way to make that a more meaningful experience for you, that would be great. Have a wonderful rest of your day, whatever time that is for you.